along with Foreign Policy's Allison Carlson for conversation on investing in women-led initiatives.
Ooh, it's comfortable. We're back to pick up on an issue we started to discuss earlier that I'd like to dive into with a little bit more specificity, which is investing in women-led initiatives. And the title of this session is Power of the Purse. It is incredibly important to invest in women, invest in women-led initiatives, and that's really what is at the heart of driving impact. And both of you are very much working on the front lines of that. So I'd like to dive in. You know, as has been noted already today, we are in a time of transition and also a time when we are seeing the rollback of overseas development assistance in the US, in Europe, and elsewhere around the world. Resources are tight and increasingly constrained. However, the need is escalating. If all of you on your tables, I believe in your folders, and those online as well, a little prop, can take a look, holding too many things, can take a look at this research that was supported by Mama Cash as well, which really lays out some of the statistics about where we are with overseas development assistance and also what is needed and what is being done to drive impact on the ground. And so, Happy, I'd like to turn to you first. When you think about this landscape, how would you characterize it for the audience in terms of where we're at and what really needs to be focused on to mobilize financial resources for women-led initiatives?
Thank you so much for the question, and thank you for your invitation, and to everybody who's in the room. Ooh, that's a big question. Where'd start? I think the first thing I want to say is we recognize that it's deliberate, the rollback on ODA, because we are relitigating fights that we thought we'd won. I was at a session earlier this week where someone was saying when they were at Beijing, when they went into the negotiations around the Beijing Platform for Action, the word gender was bracketed, meaning it was still up for conversation, debate. Was it a legitimate concept? This was 30 years ago. And we're right back there, 30 years later, where the concept again is being relitigated. We thought we'd fought that fight. And those who are invested in keeping gender bracketed and then ultimately out of the room as an issue, they recognize that if they roll back ODA, they've won the fight. Because folks who are making these things possible for us, the women who are in those rooms in Beijing who ensured that gender was not bracketed, that it was an issue, it was a term, it was a legitimate concept that the United Nations as an entire multilateral agency was recognizing and working towards, those women, they fought that fight because they had resources. They had money to pay for the tickets to go to Beijing. They could eat. They could talk with their partners and their friends and strategize together. So taking away those resources is a deliberate strategy to roll back the gains. Recognizing that, then it's like, okay, fine. It was said in an earlier panel that we need to figure out how do we strategize together to counter that. We know, we've done some numbers, some preliminary numbers, which are showing us, as of today, between two governments and two significant private philanthropy agencies, we know that per year, $730 million is leaving women's rights movements. When you know that only 1% of ODA goes towards women, rolling back 730 million is a big deal because first we already don't have money, and then the little money that we have is being taken away. So then it's like this is what it looks like. This is what it means when the money gets rolled back, and the impact on it is that we're not able to create change, the peace that Shaza was talking about. That's what it means. So we have to organize ourselves, come work together with each other, because while ODA is being rolled back, we know that people are also making a lot of money, right? So there is money sitting in places that it could be directed towards women-led initiatives around the world. So our aim right now in this moment is feminist funds like Mama Cash, women's funds, folks in philanthropy who are invested in gender equity. We're organizing ourselves together to see how do we unlock new resources. Because the way to get it to the women's rights organizations, that part we know how to do. The issue is how do we unlock the resources?
Thank you. And that perfectly sets up my next question about unlocking those resources. Like you said, $730 million a year is an incredible amount of money when there is the wealth out there sitting in other places and being generated elsewhere. And so I'd like to turn to you and, in your work and in the places where you're working, and also with the creation of 100 Women at Davos in particular. How are you thinking about this mobilization and reorientation of financial resources to women-led initiatives?
Well, first of all, thank you, FP, for having me here, having us here. And hello, everybody. I'm just seeing all these wonderful faces, and I've just been staring at all of you. Thank you for being here. The first thing is that, and as Happy has explained, the whole context and what's happening now. But this is a time of action. First of all, progress is never linear. When it's real, when it's serious progress. You do have times when it comes like that, right? So we mustn't be negative. What we must do is turn this around and look at it positively. So there are a couple of things that I would like to mention. The first one is, and it might seem strange, but if we look in the US and even, I think, OECD and even globally, when we look at the percentage relatively of women and men that, have university degrees, women are overtaking men. What does that mean? Women, over the last 50 years, have acquired so much education, and with education comes knowledge, with knowledge comes responsibility, with responsibility comes power. What are we doing? No one can take that away from us. So we do have choices, we do have the knowledge. That's the first thing. The second thing is when we look at the money, where is the money? There is a great wealth transfer that is happening into the hands of women. $30 trillion will be in the hands of women in the next 20 years, but it's already started. So the question is, those funds are under the control of women, whether it's through intergenerational transfer, whether it's through wealth. What are women going to do? What are they starting to do with the money? One thing that we find is in terms of power, is that our male peers understand instinctively or maybe socialized that money is power. So I give you a little example in something that I was doing. It was a little project. We had a not-for-profit women. These were all high-level professional women. In fact, we had women in investment banking, et cetera, et cetera. And so we assigned people roles, okay? So who would do, the outreach, who would be handling finance, etc. Do you know that we couldn't get one woman who would accept to take up the finance role? Now, if I assure you, because I work in corporate banking, that if it had been male-led, you'd find the opposite, because that is where the power is. So as women, we need to exercise our power. There is a lot of wealth that is out there heading into the hands of women or already into the hands of women. And we do see that women with wealth spend relatively more in proportion on initiatives, philanthropic initiatives than their male peers. So that is one area that I feel that we need to actually look at and think of it ourselves. Wealth is just any amount of cash that you have available. Where are you putting it? What are the decisions you're making? We have the education, we increasingly have the funding, we control spending, consumer spending, and therefore we need to exercise that power and put money where money should be, in the hands of women and women-led initiatives.
Very well put and well said. So when you think about mobilizing the money and the power of that capital when in the hands of women, Happy, I'd like to turn to you. And if you could share a little bit more about your work at Mama Cash. And not only how are you mobilizing money, but what instruments are being effective? And as you're thinking about the grant making that you're doing, the participatory nature of it, the inclusive nature of it, how are you designing your programs to ensure impact? What metrics are you establishing? How are you going about doing it?
Don't have small questions, do you? So an ethos that guides how we work at Mama Cash is we recognize that change, lasting change, sustainable change, comes from those people who are directly impacted by the issue. I had a former boss who used to say the person who wears the shoe is the one who knows where it pinches. So we move from that ethos in that the way we work at Mama Cash is we essentially receive money. We get money from multiple sources, individuals, philanthropy, and governments, and then we move it to organizations. We move it to people who are where the shoe is pinching. So organizations, women working on issues of food security, people who are working on issues of abortion and contraception, and list goes on. And we fund them to do the work directly, and we move grants to them. How we make decisions is the communities themselves are the ones who are making those decisions, because again, the people who wear the shoe know where it pinches. So they make the decisions around who gets funded and how much. That matters for us because that in itself is built in a very strong accountability mechanism. I say accountability because a lot of times when people look at women, they don't trust us, unfortunately. So they want to make sure that when I give the money does the thing it's supposed to do. Well, we've set up a mechanism that ensures that. So from the point when folks are coming to Mama Cash and in conversation with us, they are part of a community. Everybody knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. And that builds in a logic of then we are able to be in conversation with a group, to check in with you, figure out how can we support you to do the thing you need to do better. And similarly, they can come back to us. I say all of this because I'm very interested in that 30 trillion that you talked about and how we can get this 30 trillion to move to the communities. Because can you imagine, right? In 1983, when Mama Cash started, there was no country in the world that had any laws on the book around intimate partner violence. Fast forward 40 years, 163 countries have laws that have been implemented around intimate partner violence. And the data is clear that this happens because there's women's movements, women's organizations working in those countries, making that kind of change. And they're doing this with 1% of ODA. So folks, can we imagine what it would look like if they had that 30 trillion? What kind of world would we live in? We wouldn't be having the kinds of conversations you turn on your news and like, what the hell is going on? That wouldn't be what we're seeing. We'd rather be like, ooh, my children are fed, I have childcare, I'm able to be safely going to work, no more war. Like, that world is possible, people. It's possible if women get that 30 trillion.
Yes. Yes. Let's talk a little bit more about that 30 trillion, if that's all right. And Nino, I'd like to turn to you. When you think about catalytic capital and the kinds of mechanisms that are mobilizing and driving that impact, how are you thinking about it, drawing from your corporate banking experience and the work that you're doing now? How can this be operationalized?
Just before I answer that, I just want to talk about, just quickly, another 1%. Many of you here, how many people are entrepreneurs here or founders? Gosh, quite a few. Now, PitchBook or Pitch Deck, I can't remember, they released a report in the last few days or weeks and showing that the amount of venture capital that is going to women-led businesses, you all know that it was sort of 2% or under, is actually 1%. Think of a circle and try to draw a 1% slice. Negligible. Sisters, we have a problem here. So that is the starting point. So what are we doing? And I will tell you what we are doing. At the United Nations General Assembly here in New York in September, we launched a new initiative called Women in Philanthropy and Impact Africa. And the reason why we launched this initiative was fairly simple. Actually, as a network, simply because women are the backbone of the philanthropic sector. But yet, what do we see when we look at the top of philanthropic organizations? We don't have too many like Happy. They do not get to the top. And yet, we know the impact when you have women in decision-making, that they support more socially led initiatives and social impact initiatives. So that's the first thing. So the network is there to actually do that. But the second thing is actually to connect with global philanthropic organizations. In that one event, by the way, the idea came to us in May. In September, we are launching at UNGA. In the room, we had at least 25 global philanthropic organizations. And we will have an event here, a small event here, a high-level dinner here. So the thing is, we're linking women in philanthropy and philanthropic organizations with the funding in order to fund initiatives that have a gender lens, not just because it's good for women and children, we know that, but because it's good for society. So that is our major initiative, and that is something that we're working very hard on now.
If I could ask you both a quick follow-up to that. You know, when there is support for women-led initiatives, sometimes that support is short-term grants, and is project-based. And so when you're thinking about the work that you both are doing, but also what needs to be done, how can we all ensure that that funding support is long-term so that these projects can be scaled? How are you thinking about that?
You want to start? You want me to start? I'm going to go.
Who would like to
All
jump in?
right. Yeah. So we spend a lot of time convincing people, call long-term flexible. I say these words so much, like, it's still not resonating. For us at Mama Cash, we work with groups for at least 10 years. And this is still seen as radical in philanthropy. 10 years. When we know, for example, it took folks over 500 years to end the formalized forms of enslavement. Yet we're getting 10-year grants. And you're like, that's radical. So, yeah, laugh with me. It's ridiculous, right? But it is constantly being in conversation with people to say to them, we actually do need to do this because change takes time. Like you said, we go forward, we go back, we go around the corner. So it is being in conversation with folk to make clear that change takes time, and working with folks like us, we can hold that line. We can keep moving the money through long term because that's what we're set up to do. But if the money coming to us is 2 years, 3 months, 6 weeks, that's not how change happens. Change takes time.
And how do you think about those long-term commitments? Anina?
For us, the first thing is when we talk about philanthropy, at WIPIA is the name of our initiative, we are looking at catalytic philanthropy, which is what Happy is talking about here. This is philanthropy that will have systemic change, philanthropy that is stepping into the places where you don't have, where the public sector funding and private sector funding isn't in, but this will open up the doors to long-term financing and funding from those two sectors. We're looking at working with organizations that realize the importance of this. We're coming to the places where the funders are. We are not waiting for them to come to us, right, with a value proposition that shows, right, based on studies, how this can be transformative. It is to the advantage, it is to the benefit of everybody. Those communities, people, men, women, to the whole world, if we can have sustainable development. And so what we're looking at is how can we transform, for example, social entrepreneurship and female entrepreneurship, where funding isn't, where there isn't funding, so that these become initiatives or these become ventures that grow, that can scale up, and that can make real systemic change in the places that they are in. So that is the way we're looking at it. We're looking at key things. Digital technology, closing the gap, for us is really important. AI and emerging technologies, upskilling, reskilling, closing the gap in healthcare. We know that once you if you are able to close the gap in healthcare, that allows communities to become more durable, more sustainable, because when women are healthy, we know where the benefit goes to their families and to their communities.
Can I just chime in also, lifting up models of philanthropy that really are working differently? So the gifts that Mackenzie Scott made over the years, there's a lot of research that has been done to show that her model of giving checks and going like, there's the money, you go do that thing, is transformative. And it is possible to do that. So let's do it that way. Why not?
Thank you for ending us on a very positive and constructive note. The work is being done. There are models out there that can be looked to. One question to you both, for those in the audience. As we were talking about earlier, this is an opportunity for engagement. There's a great deal of expertise in the room, and often people ask, how do I get involved? What do I do? I hear you, but I want to engage. What would be either your recommendation or invitation to everyone in this room? And Nino, I'll start with you, and then Happy, over to you.
The first thing is that it's intentional. We're talking to a group of, highly educated, competent women. Do the research, spend some time and think about it. What is driving you? What's interesting to you? What would you think that you would like to be involved in? And there's a lot of information out there, and then go for it. My name is Anino Emua. You can find me on LinkedIn. I answer to my messages, despite the fact that I get a lot of them, and I shall point you in the right direction. But being intentional and actually taking the time to research and look at what you're interested in, you'll come up with, the information. Otherwise, do connect with me with great pleasure.
The invitation is to give to Mama Cash. I'm shameless about it. No, but in all honesty, yes, give to Mama Cash. And there is an entire network of women's and feminist funds who are set up to move money directly into the hands of activists doing work around the world. I say to people right here, right now, anybody in the room, if you want to move money to an activist in any country in the world, I can get that done for you right here, right now. We are connected. So please reach out to us. We have some brochures that we left at the front desk. My people over at that corner, please come talk to us. We can connect you and help you figure out how to get that 30 trillion to feminists around the world.
Yes. Be shameless, be bold, and engage with one another. Thank you both. Appreciate it.